Howdy folks and welcome back. Well, for today's video I present to you Luxury Rides the Rails. This program is about private passenger cars and the role they play and continue to play in railroads today. Back then you could get your own palace on wheels basically, or your own house on wheels, well, rails, when train trips used to take days. Private cars are beautiful, elegant, and amazing. And a lot of people today actually have some from, well, predecessor railway companies. They take them and they convert them into homes on rails. Anyway, here we go. Enjoy. All aboard for Luxury Rides the Rails.
Funding for this program was provided by the American Association of Private Railcar Owners.
There was a time in America when one could ride a passenger train nearly anywhere in the country. Thousands of trains crisscrossed the nation daily. They ranged in size from mainline trains that ran through major metropolitan areas to those that reached tiny hamlets on branch lines. While some trains were nameless, others were known by world-famous designations that sparked excitement and thoughts of speed and luxury. The name Super Chief, Train of the Stars, or 20th Century Limited brings to mind images of luxury express trains passing through the night. Those trains were carrying passengers who would take a meal in the dining car, on linen-draped tables, enjoy a drink in the lounge car, and then bed down on a soft mattress in a Pullman car while listening to the sound of singing rails beneath them. Every major railroad operated named passenger trains, which they considered to be goodwill ambassadors for the rail line. The thought was, if you rode their train, you might ship your freight on their railroad too. For Union Pacific, a meal in one of their dome dining cars as you sped across the wide open spaces of the West would leave a lasting impression. Or how could you forget Santa Fe's famous French toast? In a Fred Harvey dining car. What a memory you'd have of Southern Pacific's Great Salad Bowl, savored as you traversed 113 miles of Pacific Ocean scenery. After World War II, there was a short renaissance of rail passenger service with the introduction of new streamliners such as the California Zephyr, Empire Builder, Broadway Limited, Olympian Hiawatha, and New York Central's Great Steel Fleet, to name a few. What happened to this luxurious form of transportation? Well, things started going downhill in the late 1950s when the airlines introduced jet service, and the newly constructed interstate highway system turned travelers away from trains and toward driving their own automobiles. The last straw came when the mail was removed from passenger trains and put on either trucks or planes. The railroads were losing a ton of money and they wanted out of the passenger business. So Amtrak was formed to take over America's passenger service. Nearly half of the nation's passenger trains disappeared overnight on May 1st, 1971, when Amtrak began service. All of this sounds depressing. Is luxurious rail transportation gone forever? Would it be possible to once again experience the grandeur of our passenger trains of the past? The answer is yes. Remember some of those trains that were mentioned earlier? Super Chief, California Zephyr, or 20th Century Limited? Some are still roaming the rails in North America today, but not as complete trains, rather as individual rail cars that were once in the consists of some of these famous trains. Welcome to Luxury Rides the Rails, private rail cars through the years. Before income taxes and executive aircraft, there was the private rail car, a sort of land-roving yacht. These steel-wheeled yachts crossed America from coast to coast, border to border, carrying captains of industry and finance, the rich and famous of American society. A few of these cars were owned by recognizable names such as Vanderbilt, Guggenheim, Flagler, Huntington, and Stanford. The first recorded use of a private rail car occurred in 1841, when the Baltimore and Ohio provided what might have been the very first private rail car. They produced a unique car for President-elect William Henry Harrison to ride from Ohio to Washington for his inaugural. During the Civil War, the first private car with complete living quarters was constructed by the U.S. Military Railroad Authority for President Lincoln. It was part of the Lincoln funeral train after his assassination. Private rail cars became popular after the Civil War with the flood of wealth and railroad expansion. Private cars symbolized the fortunes derived from the building of railroads, as their lines appeared on a map like fingers reaching westward. The first dinner party of photographic record to be held on a private car was hosted by Union Pacific officials at Rock Creek, Wyoming in 1869. This was part of the celebration that marked the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. The golden age of private rail cars in the United States started in the early 1880s and ended with the stock market crash of 1929. During this period, wealthy car owners would often travel on their private cars to resorts, such as the Hotel Royal Poinciana in Palm Beach, Florida, or the Greenbrier in West Virginia. Or they would ride to the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs. Even today, private rail cars still travel to the Derby. For nearly half a century, the Pullman Company, later known as Pullman Standard, built between 300 and 400 private and business cars. In addition to these cars, the Pullman Company also maintained a small fleet of all-steel private cars. Over 20 of these private cars were built between 1911 and 1928, replacing older wooden cars. The first of these new cars were named Federal and National. The Federal still exists today and is currently being restored. Other cars were named for destinations that the cars might visit, such as Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington. The third group of cars were named after famous explorers. A good example of this third group is the Ferdinand Magellan, which was built in 1928. In 1942, the car was upgraded and armored for presidential use. The Magellan weighs 285,000 pounds, or 142.5 tons. It's the heaviest passenger rail car in the United States. President Roosevelt traveled about 50,000 miles in the Ferdinand Magellan. However, President Harry S. Truman used the car more than any other president. Unlike Roosevelt, who preferred to travel at 35 miles an hour, Truman was happy with speeds of up to 80 miles an hour. Whenever the car was part of a train, it traveled under the code POTUS, a word taken from the first letters of the phrase President of the United States. And this car had the right-of-way over all other traffic. The Ferdinand Magellan was declared surplus in 1958. But in 1984, the car came out of retirement for the Heartland Special, so that President Ronald Reagan could make a one-day whistle-stop tour through Ohio. The car is now on display at the Gold Coast Railroad Museum in Miami, Florida.
Hello, Douglas. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing great.
Thank you very much for being here.
20 years after Reagan's Heartland Special, presidential candidate John Kerry made a whistle-stop tour of the Southwest called Believe in America. It used 17 cars, of which a number were private rail cars. 5,000 people greeted Kerry in La Junta, Colorado. Private cars varied in degree of luxury and cost. While the Pullman Company produced the majority of cars, other manufacturers made private cars, such as Barney and Smith, Jackson and Sharp, and American Car and Foundry. Keep in mind, these cars were manufactured many years ago. Maintaining private cars can best be described as a labor of love and talent. Dave Pitts explains.
When we started the work on Colorado Pine, we formed an S corporation to essentially own the car, where we all become partners or shareholders, if you will, in the corporation. Many of us come on to provide variety of level of work, be it electrical, air conditioning, all the other skill sets required to bring the car up, painting, windows. So it allowed us to have a good cohesive group to build the car, bring it up to standards. Also, it gives us a pool of people who can take the car out and run the car, and gives us that ability to have the structure we need to maintain the car in the long run.
What Dave doesn't mention is that the restoration started in 1989, and the car finally made its first trip 14 years later in 2003. It traveled from Denver to New Orleans for a private railcar convention. The Colorado Pine was originally built for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad and named Plantation Pine. Jack Hurd shares some history about his private car, the Georgia 300.
Georgia 300 was built in 1930 by the Pullman Company, and it was one of several cars that were built in the later years of the General Series. It was a 10-section lounge car, which meant that it had a lounge area, and then it had 10 sections. The car was later taken out of service in 1949, and it was sold to the Atlanta West Point Railroad, who took it to their shops in Montgomery and built it into, as a joint effort, built it into the office car of the Georgia Railroad Car 300. I wanted to bring the car back to something that was similar to the railroad use of the car, but also mix that with a private use of the car, where the car would be comfortable, homey, and inviting to be used on trips privately owned.
Another car which has a rich history is the Virginia City. Wade Pellizer tells the story of this unique car.
Virginia City was built in 1928, was built as Pullman Observation Lounge bedroom car, Crystal Peak. It ran on the San Francisco Overland. In 1938, it was sent back to the Pullman shops. It was air-conditioned and renamed Golden Peak and assigned to the Golden State Limited. After the war, for about a year or so, it ran on the Empire Builder, which was a Seattle to Chicago train. It was then put up into the Pullman used car lot in Calumet, Illinois, where it sat for a few years until Lucius Beebe looked at it and a number of other cars and bought it for $5,000. In 1955, it was outshopped for $350,000 additional dollars as the Virginia City. There's a lot of antiques that were purchased. The designer, Robert Hanley and Associates from Los Angeles, did a trip to Europe, mostly around northern Italy, and came back with a lot of antiques to put in the car. And he was asked by them to build something that was outrageous, and he felt that he'd done a very good job doing that.
Bill Hofer provides some background about another car that ran on a Western Railroad, the North Star. The car saw many years of service on the Great Northern Railway before becoming a private rail car.
The car was built in 1947. It was built by the Pullman Company for the Great Northern Railroad. It was built specifically as a business car. The current owner has turned it over into a private rail car and refurbished it with the beautiful chairs, beds, and state-of-the-art kitchen.
Of the many famous trains that operated after World War II, one was a standout because of its unique rear car. The Milwaukee Road fielded a series of trains called Hiawatha's. A car from one of those trains still operates today as a private car. It's called Cedar Rapids.
This car, of course, is so unique because of its glassed-in lounge area on the end, and there's no other observation car that ever rode the rails in the United States with this sort of configuration. Just an incredibly creative design by the Milwaukee Road people so many years ago, and it's just fun to think about the many thousands of people that enjoyed traveling along the Mississippi River between Chicago and the Twin Cities. And of course, cars similar to this also went all the way to the west coast to Seattle, back on the Olympian Hiawatha.
Well, this car was designed by Brooks Stevens, who was a very famous industrial designer in the Milwaukee area. He liked to call himself a stylist. In this particular car, he was looking for a car where people could sit across from each other, converse, but yet have the view, the 360-degree panoramic view, whereas many cars, people would actually face outward. In this car, you face inward, but you're looking at the scenery, which is behind the person across from you. So you can carry on a conversation with an individual, but yet you can take in all the splendor of the scenery.
Another remarkable private car was built by the Wabash Railroad Shops in 1954 for the Anheuser-Busch Corporation of St. Louis. The car was named Adolphus. Since that time, the car has gone through several owners. After the beer company, this car became Business Car 1000 for the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1965. Later, it was used by the Penn Central Railroad. Autoliner Corporation of Omaha purchased the car and renumbered it 10,000. For several years, Amtrak used the car for special events and VIP travel. The Jane Marie had a more modest beginning as a 68-seat long-distance coach. It ran on the Rock Islands train Houston Twin Star Rocket. Originally named Des Moines, the car was used by the Rock Island until the railroad ceased operation in 1980. The current owner purchased this coach in 1989 and moved it to the Arizona Railway Museum. Over the years, Jane Marie has been totally rebuilt mechanically. The interior was entirely reconfigured into a private car with a large lounge, 2 master bedrooms, a dining room, and a full-service galley. Quite a transformation from the coach it once was. Another historic car that has undergone a transformation is the Sierra Hotel. It was changed from a California Zephyr passenger dome car to a dome business car.
This car was originally built in 1948 as a dome car, mid-train dome car for the California Zephyr. The lounge space was originally the cable car room, and it was decked out in a decor reminiscent of San Francisco and the cable cars. The car was rebuilt in the late 1980s, added an open platform to the rear of the car, increased the size of the lounge, upgraded the capacity and style of the rooms, and now it's a dome business car.
Not only were American railroad cars saved from the scrapper's torch, but a few from Canada have been preserved as well. The Burrard was one of the last open platform cars built by Pullman Standard in 1954. It was ordered by the Canadian National Railway as a special tour car to serve in their upgraded fleet. As we mentioned earlier, restoring a private rail car is a labor of love. While some are do-it-yourself owners, others turn to professionals who provide what one might say is a turnkey service. Restoring a private rail car requires more than fresh paint, new carpeting, and replacing the furniture. In order to run, cars must be mechanically sound. This involves an overhaul of the running gear and the trucks, or wheels. If a car is going to operate on Amtrak, it must pass a thorough inspection and be certified. Furthermore, the air conditioning, water systems, holding tanks, and electrical systems must be brought up to standard. Private rail cars come in many models, so to speak. Often people think of these cars as business cars. Those are the cars that have an open rear platform. These are reminiscent of the days when politicians made speeches from the rear platform, as shown earlier in the campaign trains of Ronald Reagan and John Kerry. Yet a private rail car can take many forms. Remember the California Zephyr? The silver solarium was used on that train for many years. It's configured as a dome sleeping lounge car. The Cedar Rapids was used on the Hiawatha trains of the Milwaukee Road. It's still a parlor car. Golden Tower started out as a sleeping car for the Rock Island's Golden State. The present owner has converted this former sleeping car into a club lounge. The Bella Vista is now a dome sleeping car. John Kirkwood provides some history about his car's heritage.
This car was originally a Union Pacific dome lounge. It had an observation end, in other words, a blunt end, with windows facing to the rear. The car was basically all open area with a bar downstairs and 24 seats up here in the dome.
Another lounge car that has an interesting history is the Hollywood Beach. Built in 1956 for the Seaboard Railroad, it was one of 3 cars ordered for the Silver Meteor. This car was sometimes called the dome that would fit in Pennsylvania Station because of its unique window placement. The car J. Pickney Henderson has a special distinction. Robert Majors provides some details that made the car noteworthy.
This car was built by Pullman Standard several years ago. It was the first all stainless steel car built by the Pullman Company. It was built for the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad and their special train called the Texas Special. It actually was named for the first governor of Texas after Texas became a state.
Riding a private rail car is often the trip of a lifetime, with the luxurious surroundings, fine food, and attentive service. But there's more to it than the cuisine. It's miles of scenery. It's the sound of the singing rails beneath the car. It's just having fun, and most of all, it's lifelong memories.
Riding a private rail car is really a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I mean, it's something that you should definitely try.
It is, I think, to relate to most people, you can say it's a land cruise, that basically private rail car travel is cruising on the land in your own vehicle, on a guideway, on track, so you're limited. On the other hand, you can see things that you can see from no other land vehicle.
It's one of those experiences that's, my wife calls it land cruising. You get to have finely prepared meals, you get to have scenery, it's very leisurely and luxurious. So traveling by private rail, I think, is a very civilized way to travel.
Private rail car is such a luxury to be able to travel the country with all the amenities that we have and are able to offer. From the scenic sights of the Moffat Tunnel all the way up to the New England area.
Private rail cars bring back an era gone by of nostalgia and history for people to travel on anywhere in the country that Amtrak goes and anywhere in Canada that VIA travels. It's a unique way to bring business or family together in a unique environment that's truly private and truly first class.
Speaking of Amtrak, one might wonder how private rail cars travel on various rail routes. Most times, private rail cars are placed behind the regular Amtrak cars. On some occasions, special, all-private car trains are operated for conventions or for rare mileage trips over rails that have not seen regular passenger service for several years. As with any group, private car owners have banded together to share stories. ride their cars to annual conventions, and offer trips that will bring lifelong memories to their passengers. The Association of Private Rail Car Owners has been the glue holding together a variety of people and their private cars. Private rail cars are a link to the past when American passenger trains were second to none in the world. It's cars from the Super Chief, California Zephyr, and Daylight that rekindle those memories. America's rail passenger service has evolved over the last 150 years and likely will continue to do so, but one thing remains constant. Traveling in a private rail car, enjoying a fine meal as the landscape rushes by, is an experience everyone should have at least once in their lifetime. John Kirkwood sums it up.
The sheer joy of going across the country in a big vehicle, it's something you can't duplicate in any way. Of varying speeds and countryside, and from the high mountains to the desert. It's just an absolute joy. It's living on the edge of ecstasy.
And there y'all have it. What an amazing program. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Yes, private rail cars are still in use today on the rails, as y'all could see by this program, and they will live on as a piece of history. They're basically rolling apartments. I have not had the chance to ride in one, but I would like to. Heck, if I had the money, I'd get my own. Yes, I know the promotion's hiding their own screen for the DVD, but whatever. Anyway, until next time, please be safe around trains. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And remember, Jesus is King. Jesus is King. Happy rails, guys. See y'all next time.